Okay, I think we'll get started now. Thank you very much. We're very pleased to have with us Maximo Torero, the Chief Economist for the Food and Agriculture Organization, who's here to talk to you about the State of Food Insecurity report. You'll recall that he briefed last week, and he has some more information on food insecurity around the world. With that, I will now turn to our guest, Mr. Torero. Welcome.
Thank you much, and good evening to all of you. What I'm going to report is the launch of the SOFI report, where basically we bring the status of the situation of food security and nutrition. So the first result is that hunger is declining, but too slowly. Today, we are in 673 million people in hunger, which is a reduction of the prevalence of undernourishment from 8.7% in 2022 to 8.2% in 2024. Second, nearly 2.3 billion people in the world lack regular access to adequate food in 2024. An estimated 28% of the global population were moderately or severely food insecure. Third, healthy diets are still out of reach. 2.6 billion people can't afford one, and this is down from 2.9 billion in 2020. Fourth, in terms of the nutrition targets, all of them are off track. There is progress on stunting and breastfeeding, but none of the 2030 global targets are on track. Fifth, inequalities persist. In rural areas, and rural men and women hit harder by food insecurity. So rural areas are hit harder than urban areas, and women are hit harder by food insecurity. Finally, the global food price inflation has emerged as a major concern since 2021. When we look at the evolution of the food price inflation, which is different to the commodity price that we report, the FAO Food Price Index, which is commodity prices. Food is when we refer to the elements that we consume in the supermarkets, in the stores, in the retail markets. The global food price inflation has emerged as a major concern since 2021. Global food inflation was 2.3% in 2020, and it went up to 13.6% in 2023. And also, the report shows how a 10% price hike will result in 3.5% more people in food insecurity. So what this report brings is that we find heterogeneity among regions. There are regions of the world that we are seeing improvements, and those are essentially Latin America and the Caribbean, where there is a reduction of the level of undernourishment in 0.2 points. Southern Asia, where there is a reduction of minus 1.2. South America, where there is a reduction of 0.4, so it's the sub-region of Latin America and the Caribbean where the biggest reduction has happened. Asia of minus 0.6, and Southeastern Asia of minus 0.3. But on the contrary, in the case of Africa, we still see a deterioration, which is an increase of 0.2 on the level of undernourishment in the world. If we project these numbers to 2030, what we observe is that we will be in around 511 million people facing chronic undernourishment if we continue at the level that we are today. And that is what we need to change so that we can achieve the SDG 2. Clearly, the region of Latin America still has a high probability of being able to achieve that result by 2030. And Southern Asia and Asia also has a probability, but Africa needs to start completely changing their performance so that we can move together. As I mentioned in the last briefing, food price inflation is increasing, and it matters because it's a base for political stability, macroeconomic stability, and food security and nutrition. And we need to work hard to find elements that will help us to reduce those problems of stability that we are facing because of food price inflation. The report ends in trying to show what are the major recommendations of what can be done. First recommendation is a more coordinated, informed, and restrained policy response. Governments have shown great awareness of the potential repercussions of uncoordinated action, and policy responses were more measured, better targeted, and grounded in lessons learned. Second, global food markets remain functional with less disruptive trade interventions. The recent food price inflation episodes saw few market interventions, and these were generally more short-lived and less disruptive. Third, importance of market transparency and timely information has been reaffirmed. By providing reliable data and improving communication between countries, Market information mechanisms reduce the risk of panic-driven policy reactions. Fourth, robust institutions and sound coordination mechanisms make difference. A stronger coordination between fiscal and monetary institutions allow for more coherent policy packages that balance short-term support to the most vulnerable populations with long-term macroeconomic stability. And finally, balancing immediate relief with structural reforms to address future food price spikes. It's important to have effective responses to food price inflation that should combine well-targeted fiscal measures, structural reforms, and coordinated policy actions. Thank you very much, and back to you.
For questions? Yes, Noreen?
Very much, sir. This is Noreen Hussain with IPS News. I wonder if, just a quick question on the report itself, does it have any indication on the impact of overfishing on food security? And if there are particular regions which sort of reflect that? Thank you.
No, the report is focused, of course, on the indicators of undernourishment and nutrition that we do. We don't look at availability of food in terms of supply. For that, we have the report of FAO and OECD Outlook that looks at the different sectors, for example, at livestock, at fisheries, aquaculture, as well as agriculture, and that shows the supply and demand styles. But this report doesn't focus on the supply side. It focuses on the net result in terms of the nutrition indicators.
Start that rural areas and are more vulnerable to food insecurity and to the impact of global food inflation. Can you sort of clarify or perhaps provide better examples of where we're sort of seeing of how that impact looks like in action?
So what basically the report shows, when we segment the elasticities to look at the impacts in rural versus urban areas of food inflation and in women versus men, is that the impact is higher in terms of rural areas, meaning the prices are less sticky to decrease in rural areas relative to urban areas. So if the commodity prices go down in rural areas or in global, the impact over rural areas will be slower in terms of reduction of prices relative to urban areas. As a result, the consumers in rural areas will be more affected. Not only that, the rural poor consume most of the basket in food, and therefore, if food prices increase, they will be more vulnerable. The same applies to the gender gap between men and women. Women are more vulnerable because they have less income, and most of their income is to buy food, and therefore the impact of food prices increases will be higher than in the case of men.
Okay. Are there any other questions in the room? I don't see any questions online, but if there's anyone online who wants to ask a question, you can act now. I would like once again to thank our guest, Maximo Torero, the Chief Economist of the FAO. Thanks very much for your briefing, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, and sorry for being late.
No problem at all. There's a bunch of competing events in the building, so I think it worked out. Thanks. Have a good day. All right. Good afternoon, everyone.